Alrighty, welcome to week 2 of a very Hyperdrive holiday, and this week's tutorial comes from Colonel Pepper's request to make a time vortex like the intro to Doctor Who to celebrate 50 years of Doctor Who. Now, full disclosure, I've never actually watched Doctor Who, but I went and looked up the intros on YouTube, and I saw how they changed over the course of 50 years, and I kind of got something that will give you the same vortex through space nebulous idea, and everything is done right inside of After Effects with the basic plugins. So let's get started. Alrighty, so we're inside of After Effects. I have the comp that I made before for the preview, and we're going to start from scratch. So I'm just going to click in the project window, go to New Composition. We'll call this Doctor Who Timewarp. And 10 seconds long is good. Okay. Now, before I get started, you probably have seen, if not, you should definitely go look it up, a similar tutorial by Video Copilot called Galactic Orb, which kind of does a similar flying through space, a nebulous space effect. This one's going to be slightly different, just because I don't want to rehash something that Andrew Kramer already did. But after watching this, I definitely recommend you go watch that one, combine the two, think up your own unique twist on it, and you can make some pretty cool time warp looking effects. With both tutorials in mind. And the link to that tutorial is in the description below. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started. We're going to make a new solid, and we're working at 1280 by 720, so 720p, and we're going to call this particles. Simple enough. We're going to go to Effect, Simulation, Particle World, and this comes with every copy of After Effects. Going to set this to off. Going to go to the particle, make it a faded sphere, and let's see, let's make these each about 1. Max opacity 100%, transfer mode, screen. And we're going to change the colors. So right now it starts off yellow and then it turns red as it dies off. We're going to change the colors to a kind of orange, and then to a between orange and red. So we're shifting it over a little bit. And you know what? Let's take that. Let's actually bump this up a little bit more towards yellow, and move it a little bit towards white, so that the saturation is at 75%. There we go. So we've got our particles, and this is going to be what kind of drives the entire animation. We're going to collapse particles. Go to Physics. We're going to keep them explosive, but we're going to set the velocity to 0. And we're going to set the gravity to 0, so they're just kind of floating there in an orb. Now what we're going to do is expand them super, super far into space, and we did something kind of similar with the Hyperdrive Pictures logo. And we're going to expand this into space by going to the Producer tab and making the radius Z huge. And we're also going to make the radius X 0.2. And the radius y 0.2. And you see we've got this essentially long tube of particles going straight away from the camera. Speaking of camera, that's the next thing we have to do is make a new camera. So go to Layer, New Camera. 35mm preset is good. And New Null Object. Make this null object 3-dimensional. Parent the camera to the null object. So now what we're going to do is go to the beginning of our comp, and you can see there's not any particles yet because they haven't been born yet. So what we are going to do is at the beginning of the comp, take the bottom layer, which is our particles layer, and just move it over till we have a bunch of particles on screen. And that's a good amount. And then extend it to fill up the entire comp. We're going to then take our null, hit P, make a keyframe. We're going to move back until there's no more particles. Basically, we're going to go to the very end of this particle tube, and then move forward to the 10-second mark, and move all the way to the other end. And I'm holding Shift to move quicker. And right about here is good. So right now all we have is just flying through this stream of particles. Doesn't look too time warpy yet. But we're getting there. Next thing we're going to do is duplicate it. So you can hit Control or Apple D depending on if you're on PC or Mac, or you can go to Edit, Duplicate, And then you can go to particle. We're going to change things up a little bit on this one. We're going to make the birth and death size of these 0.8 for the birth size, 0.5 for the death size. So these will actually shrink as time goes on. Then we're going to go to birth color, set it to this nice blue, and then death color is going to be in purple. Now we're going to go to toggle switches and modes. We're going to set this to screen, as well as the first one, screen. Now right now the particles are the exact same position. The sizes are different, but in the exact same position, which is making it look a little weird because they're overlaying on top of the other thing. We're going to offset that by just moving this over. So now we have some different placement on our particles. And then we'll also go to our producer and move it a little farther back in Z space. So, like that. Okay, now we fly through and we have this super interesting multiple colored looking effect. But let's make this look like a time warp. So, we're going to go add a couple of hoops, because in some of the Doctor Who intros there's some interesting hoops that fly by. So we're going to go to New, Solid, go to 720 by 720. We're going to color it yellow. We're going to go to our mask shape tool, go pick the ellipse, double click it. That makes a perfect circle because our layer was a perfect square. And then in the masks options, we're going to duplicate that mask, set it to subtract, open it up, bring the expansion in, and we'll feather it a bit. There we go. So we have a nice hoop. We're going to make it 3D. And we're going to just place it at a couple different places in our particle tube. So we're just going to hit P, go to the Z, and then just, throw it way, way down there. Duplicate it, make another one, P, bringing it way, way close. Even closer, right there. Duplicate it again. We're going to hit R this time, rotate it on the X-axis, so it's facing at an angle to the camera. We'll go 75 degrees. Then we're going to hit S, change the scale, and really stretch it out vertically a ton. So let's go to 300%. So it's 3 times as high as it is wide. Go to P, and just move this to another place, right there. And then duplicate that again. Go hit hit R to go to rotation, and then just make that X rotation negative. So it's the inverse kind of rotation from the first one. And again, we'll just put that somewhere in Z space. And just offset them all a bit more. So these are all beyond the tube. Beyond the tube. Let's move these closer to us. Interesting. Now when we fly through here, we still need some more particles. So let's go to our particles and extend that Z-axis even more. Let's that radius. Let's make it 8. Same thing for this one. 8. We're going to need a lot more particles to fill up this space. Let's make this one 4. And we'll make this one 6. We want there to be a little bit more of the orange than of the blue. The blue is kind of just a highlight. Yeah. And then let's take our null and move even farther down the line. 1, 2. All right, let's move these closer in. Let's go to this end, move farther back. Okay, good. All right, so Now let's mess up with these let's mess these circles up a bit because they look too perfect. We're gonna go to distort, turbulent displace, and alt click on the evolution, hit time times 60, and then copy that. Actually, we'll copy the entire effect because what we're doing is placing it on the rest of these circles, so that way they all look a little wonky like this, which is good. So they don't look like perfect circles, they look kind of weird. Okay. So we've got that, and we're flying through here. Looks pretty cool. Now we're going to turn the motion blur on for all of our circles. We're going to go to our particles, go to Options, Rendering, Force Motion Blur. Now I'm using After Effects CS3. So to make motion blur on CC Particle World, this is what you do. You go into Options, Force Motion Blur. But for After Effects CC, Creative Cloud, I believe it starts in Creative Cloud. You don't have to do this menu. You just put the motion blur tab on here and it adds the motion blur. But if you're not using CC, don't do that because that'll mess it up. If you are using CC, just hit the motion blur tab. Hopefully I did not confuse you just there. Force motion blur. Okay. So now, as we zoom on through, we get a nice motion blur to all of our images. And then let's see, let's go to the camera. These circles, we can see all of them from the very first frame, which kind of ruins the effect. So let's add some depth of field here to kind of make things not look so sharp. Camera options in our camera, we're going to go to depth of field on, and we'll just solo these, so we're only focusing on these hoops for right now. We are going to make our focus distance fairly close, so that way they don't really come into focus till they're right up on the camera. And then we're going to open up our aperture. There we go. Let's go to about 85, and then the focus distance right at 400. You can eyeball it. It doesn't have to be this exact number, but I'm just picking what looks good at a glance. Turning these back off so everything is visible. Now let's turn these spherical particles into a nebulous time warp. First thing we're going to do is make a new solid layer that is black. We're going to make it 1920 by 1080. And this is going to be our background. So you can type background or BG. We're going to put it at the very bottom. And we need this black layer for all the compositing that we're about to do. So we're going to put our camera null up top just because I like to have them organized that way, and I'll make them green so they're easy to see. Our yellow solids will be yellow. And our particles, the top one was blue, and then the bottom one was orange, because that's the kind of shade that those particles had, if you remember. And then our background is red or whatever color we want. This is just a good way to keep everything organized. We're going to go to New, Adjustment Layer. Put one right underneath the camera, or at the very top, it doesn't really matter. But it has to be above all of your yellow solids and particles and backgrounds. That's what's important. We're going to go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, Vector Blur, CC Vector Blur. We're just going to bump it up. Maybe not quite to 40. Let's try 20. Yeah, so now we're getting some interesting webbing like that in the distance. And then we're going to make another adjustment layer. This is going to give us an interesting glow. So we're going to put it above the first one, set it to Screen, go to Effect, Blur, Fast Blur. Let's make this 15 pixels. Repeat edge pixels. And this is the point in the process when I like to lower the resolution because it's getting pretty processor intensive. So we've got one glow. I believe I've showed you this method before. Duplicate it. And this is the Ryan Weber method, which you can find online. Duplicate it once, change it to 30, duplicate it a second time, we're going to double it again, change it to 260. And it's pretty bright, but let's see. Let's put this back to full. So that last one's a little too bright. Let's lower the opacity to 25. Okay, so that's looking pretty cool, but we still have a lot of empty space, a lot of just black around here. So let's duplicate our particles one more time. Apple D, Control D. Put it above our adjustment layers, then solo it so we can see clearly. We're going to offset it again. We're going to go to our particle, and we're going to make them white. We're just going to make a star field to populate this empty space here. We're going to make this 0.01 birth size, 0.01 death size. It's pretty small. Let's go 0.02. Double it. There we go. We'll up the birth rate, since these are pretty small and hard to see, to 9. 14. Let's try 14. There we go. And make the size variation 0. Turn it off. Now we have a star field going through everything. And if you want, you could put it underneath the adjustment layers, and it'll have the same glow, but you also might lose a little bit of detail. It depends on if you want them to be sharp stars or not. It's all up to you. So I just went back and looked at the original effect I did, which looked a little bit better, and I realized I was giving you a much bigger size for the particles than you should have been using. So let's go down to our original particles. Let's also extend this star particles, and then name it star particles so we know. Let's move on down to our original particles. These need to be a little bit smaller, so let's go to the orange ones and make the birth size 0.4 and our death size 0.4. Then let's go to the blue and purple particles. Let's make those 0.3 for the birth size, 0.2 for the death size. Let's give it a second to render all that out. And it looks a little bit better. There's not too much particle action going on. So let's up the birth rate on both of them. Let's make the top one 8 and the bottom one 10. Give that a second. It's all about tweaking everything to see what looks good. Alright, we're getting there. Let's make the birth rate for the orange ones 12. There we go. And now let's put this down to quarter res so I can scrub through this. And we're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere. Still needs to fill out a bit more, so let's go a little bit crazy. Let's make the birth rate for the orange 15, and for the purple and blue 12. Just want to fill out this space a little bit more. Now that our particles are much smaller, we can also fill out the space by changing the glows on our adjustment layers. So we're going to go back to our adjustment layers. We're going to essentially double them. So the first one's going to be 30 instead of 15. The second one's going to be 60 instead of 30. And the last one is going to be 120. And let's see what that looks like at full opacity. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, that's filling out the space a lot more. Then we have those hoops, and the hoops that are at an angle kind of stretch towards the camera. Make it a little bit trippy. And then you have the normal ones that are face on with the camera. So, that is how you make a Doctor Who Time Warp looking effect. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for the comment, Colonel Pepper. Alright, that's the tutorial. It's pretty simple. You can get some really good stuff if you decide to sit there and tweak it a little more than what I've showed you. And I think I mentioned it before, but the basic idea of this tutorial comes from a Video Copilot tutorial and then just some modifications on that. So definitely check out videocopilot.net. and then you can see that original tutorial. I think it's like orb sphere or something, whatever this says. Just check the description, the link. If you like this tutorial and you want to see more, please like the video and leave a comment with what else you want us to do. And if you really, really want to see more, hit the subscribe button, because we're doing 2 more of these, and I love doing all these really cool tutorials that you guys ask for. So that's everything. I'll see you guys next week with a tutorial on how to morph, not like Power Ranger morph, but like Animorph morph, from a person to another person or a person to an animal, something like that. Punch it!